So, a guy and his horse go out to kill giants in a forbidden land to save a woman by resurrecting the devil. Essentially. No, this isn't the start of a joke, it's the premise for one of the most noteworthy video games of the PlayStation 2. And that's it, that's pretty much the entire story, but it's good, endearingly good, so good that the game ranks right up there with Halo and God of War and rolling around in a pool full of butter. But how, you might ask? It has very little of the stuff we're told all great stories are supposed to have. It's like a piece of bacon being crowned burger of the year. Sure, it tastes good, but it's not a burger, right? Well, let's dive into this story and find out. Today we're taking a different approach to teaching good storytelling, because despite the rules and guidelines I try to stress on this channel, I need to come clean. Writing advice is kinda crap. Not because it's invalid or wrong, but because it's not definitive. What makes one story great can make another story awful. What gives one story depth can bog another story down with unnecessary crap. And what makes one story empty and hollow can make another story one of the most heart-wrenching experiences of my childhood. And that's why today we're taking a closer look at Shadow of the Colossus. Consider this your spoiler warning for those of you who haven't played the game in the last 20 years that it's been out. In this video, I'm going to throw out 3 rules that I harp on pretty hard for telling a great story. Then we'll go over how SOTC takes an apparent steaming dump on that particular rule, showing you how my infinite wisdom as a writer is fallible. And finally, we're going to wrap all these dumps up with a cute little bow of universal storytelling advice that you definitely don't want to miss and you definitely don't want to skip to the end to see because that'll upset the algorithm. Subscribe and share and stuff. Here's a picture of a cookie as a thank you. But Andrews, why would you pick an old story that nobody remembers or cares about anymore? Are you stupid? Do you have dementia? How are you feeding yourself? Huh. Think of Shadow of the Colossus like your stepmom. Sure, she's older, but she just hits different and you like it. It's a great story, but it accomplishes this greatness differently than traditional stories, and that's what we all want. Something great and different, while also being familiar. Isn't that right, Karen? Anyway, let's start with my favorite rule. Character is why we care. From elaborate stories like Harry Potter to the most basic stories like The Three Little Pigs, our connection to our story's hero is critical. We want flawed heroes with the drive to do something greater than themselves, which causes them to grow. We look for an external want, an internal need, some childhood trauma, and a dash of teenage angst riddled with highs and lows, false victories, and apparent defeats. These highs and lows, pushes and pulls, give me the closest thing to emotional feelings in decades, and they're what make a story fun. But Shadow of the Colossus doesn't do this. Well, not exactly. The story follows Wander and his horse Agro as they venture to save Mono, a cursed girl sacrificed on account of, I don't know, she has cooties or something. So now you might be thinking, well, okay, what's the problem? That sounds like a good start. And it is, at least as a first draft on the back of a napkin. But this is about as deep as the plot and characters get. And look, there is more to the story. Wander stole his sword to come kill these giants, but is he conflicted about stealing it? Don't know. Is he conflicted about killing giants? Don't know. Is he doing this because he loves Mono? You get the point. We understand his external want and the 16 giant hurdles in his way, but we don't have much else to work with, and yet I still care about Wander. Why? How? I don't even remember if Wander has any dialogue in the story besides calling his horse. Well, allow me to give my subjective explanation. Despite minimal information about our hero, despite an absolute lack of a character arc, despite not even having a super solid grasp as to what is going on at the game's start, I believe that Wander is doing something good. Now, do we know that Wander is gathering up fragments of the devil to make a wish? No. Hell, I'm not even sure if Wander knows what he's doing beyond following Dorman's orders, but it doesn't matter. At least I don't think it matters. Because all we as audience members really concern ourselves with is, do we resonate with our hero's goal? Everything else, all this, is fluff that, while it is super nice to have, and I personally work hard to include it in my writing, it isn't absolutely necessary for a captivating story. But surely, someone has to pick up the emotional torch and give the audience a reason to feel, right? And that apparent misconception leads to point number 2. Supporting characters help a hero go further than they could have otherwise gone, and provide perspective that they would not otherwise have. I'm going to add another one here too. Side characters help state or exemplify a story's theme. Here are some traditional examples of perspective. Atreus offers Kratos the opportunity to balance his guilt and rage with responsibility. Gandalf offers Frodo the opportunity to see the need for pity and mercy instead of disgust. Ron offers Harry a lot of confirmation bias on our story's red herrings, while also being really good at chess. Agro, Shadow of the Colossus's primary side character, is a horse, a very difficult to control horse, a horse with no dialogue or wisdom which may conflict or aid Wander in his journey. And while Agro does help me get lost on this giant map a whole hell of a lot faster, he, or possibly she, the internet is conflicted on this, let's call her Shanae, doesn't do much to add to Wander's internal conflict, because, well, Wander doesn't even have one that we know about. However, I will concede that there is in fact 1.5 ways that Agro exemplifies the story's theme without words, without monologues, without much of anything, beyond a reassuring nudge of the head and a moment of ultimate sacrifice. Now look, in terms of side characters, animals get a pass on a lot of conventional character rules. There's literally a screenplay book loosely revolving around this. If our hero saves an animal, we like our hero. If we have a character like our hero, then it reassures us that our hero is likable. If we combine these two ideas and have an animal like our hero, we assume our hero must be an outstandingly good person because most people love animals, and animals are good judges of character, and therefore Wander must be a good dude. So, despite almost no depth to the relationship beyond, "You are my horse, I am your person. We are buddies working together to commit mountain murder and save a lady," we have a lot of emotional ties between Agro and Wander so that, when Agro sacrifices her Shanae self, the emotional impact is devastating while simultaneously exemplifying a theme of sacrifice for love. No dialogue, no internal or inter-character conflict, no intricate web of emotions, just the bond between a man and his horse in their journey through a barren land. And that's the best transition I could come up with for our point number 3, which is that world building shouldn't do a lot of heavy lifting for your story. Example time. A man with a dark past and a child who's done nothing wrong go through an absolute hellscape, losing everything in the process but finding belonging in one another. Am I talking about God of War, Logan, The Last of Us, or True Grit? The answer is E, they're all the same story, the difference is where they take place. And that might upset you, but if you're honest with yourself, that's a pretty accurate statement. The same fundamental story can happen anywhere and be great, but the setting adds a little bit of flavoring to it. This is like the color of a Ferrari. Different colors might give it appeal to different people, but at the end of the day, it's still not a fighter jet. The world doesn't command a huge force over the story. Except when it does. Shadow of the Colossus, if nothing else, is praised for its visuals, which is a lot like praising a book for its prose or a movie for its videography. And yes, while I am one of those people that would defecate my drawers if the game came out on Unreal Engine, I also realize that the beauty of the world falls short of another aspect of the Forbidden Lands: its emptiness. From giant lakes to expansive fields, open skies, and sprawling deserts, Shadow of the Colossus is beautifully empty. Like my parents' love, it is kept to a bare minimum while simultaneously feeling larger than anything else I had ever experienced. There's some that even complained that the emptiness gave off a bleary sense of despair, a feeling of loneliness that reached through the TV and left players feeling heavy in their parents' basement. But how? It's just the setting. Well, let's say we go to a concert. The music is loud, the lights are crazy, the energy is so high we aren't even fazed when the girl next to us blacks out from heat exhaustion. Our phone has been ringing in our pocket for the last 5 minutes, and we can't even feel or hear it because everything is just so overwhelming. Now let's change the scene. We're at a funeral. Great Granddad McSpanky is getting lowered into the ground. There isn't a sound besides the winch lowering the casket and Great Grandma McSpanky's suppressed sobs, but then you get a text, and everyone at the burial looks at you like you're the one that killed Great Granddad and not 80 years of cigarette smoke and working in the mines. Whether it's our 5 senses or our emotional sensitivity, the more we are given, the more we need in order to feel. You're all welcome for that free advice. I paid my therapist a lot of money for that knowledge. Anyway, the setting of Shadow of the Colossus provides so much emotional weight to the story because there really isn't a whole lot more to pull from. We are much more sensitive to the story world because our story characters are fairly straightforward, as is our premise. It's like a fart in a silent room. It sounds loud because there's nothing else to hear. So, what does this all mean for your story? That you should just chuck up a middle finger to the writing lessons and do the bare minimum? I mean, sure, you can, but you would be missing the point. Storytelling is an art form, which essentially means that there is a rulebook, but that sometimes following the rules doesn't make a good story, and sometimes ignoring most of the rules can still make a great story. This is why AI struggles with making anything phenomenal. The recipe gets you a good end product, but the nuances are what make a story spectacular. There is a reason most people will never write a book or finish a screenplay. It's frustrating as hell. Not because there's no method, but because it takes time to develop the skill of knowing when to follow or ignore the rules. And this is the extra special universal rule of writing that I promised you all at the beginning. Rules or no rules, you will never write a great story if you don't get started. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Andrews. That's not common sense or cliche or anything. Just don't mind me as I unsubscribe. Hear me out. I have read way too many books on storytelling. I've watched too many hours of lectures and lessons on YouTube. But my writing never got better until I got so fed up that I said, fuck it, I'm just going to write the worst piece of crap imaginable and not care if I follow the rules. And 400 some pages later, I wrote a story I'm actually proud of, and it's only a few ounces short of being a deadly weapon. Just look at that chunky beauty. That's why I wanted to go over Shadow of the Colossus. Because while it doesn't satisfy a lot of boxes I want checked off in a story, I still love the game. Despite relatively flat and undeveloped characters, an entire plot that could be summarized in 3 sentences, and some controls that were so wonky that they probably took years off my life, the story is still loved by a lot of people. So, get out of your head, go to your desk, and write the best damn story possible. The end.